A first-class cabin is supposed to be a symbol of success, a quiet sanctuary in the sky. But for one passenger, it became a stage for her own downfall. When Caroline Stratford saw the man in seat 1A, dressed in a faded hoodie and worn-out jeans, she didn't see a person. She saw a problem. She demanded he be removed, sneering that people like him belonged in economy. She was about to learn that the man she tried to humiliate didn't just belong in first class. He was the one who owned the airline. The first-class cabin of Aerowing Airlines Flight 12, non-stop from New York's JFK to London Heathrow, was a quiet symphony of understated luxury. Pods of brushed metal and cream-colored leather promised privacy and comfort for the 9-hour journey. Passengers, one by one, filed in, shedding cashmere coats and accepting flutes of champagne from the immaculately dressed cabin crew. Elijah Cole was already seated in 1A. He was, by any measure, an anomaly in this environment. He wasn't dressed for success, he was dressed for comfort. A well-worn, charcoal grey hoodie was pulled up over his head, and his headphones were already on. His jeans were faded, and his sneakers had seen better days. He was a tall, lean black man, and his entire posture was one of quiet focus as he hunched over a battered tablet, his finger scrolling through dense columns of numbers and legal text. He had declined the champagne, asking only for a bottle of still water. He was so absorbed in his work that he didn't notice Caroline Stratford when she stopped dead in the aisle beside him. Caroline, draped in a Burberry trench coat with a bright red Hermes bag clutched in her manicured hand, looked at Elijah as if he were a piece of gum stuck to her shoe. She sniffed, the scent of her expensive perfume, Jo Malone, peony and blush suede, momentarily cutting through the cabin's sterile air. She looked at his seat, 1A. She looked at her ticket, 1C. She looked back at him. She motioned sharply, snapping her fingers at the nearest flight attendant, a young woman named Beth, whose smile seemed permanently affixed. "Excuse me," Caroline said, her voice a loud, nasal whisper that carried through the entire cabin. "I think there's been a mistake." Beth hurried over, her smile faltering slightly at Caroline's abrasive tone. "Mrs. Stratford? Welcome aboard. Can I help you?" "Yes, you can," Caroline said, gesturing with her chin toward Elijah, who still hadn't looked up. "You have a stowaway in the first-class cabin, in that seat." Beth looked at Elijah, then at her passenger manifest. "Ma'am, that is seat 1A. He is a ticketed passenger." "Don't be ridiculous," Caroline scoffed. "He clearly wandered in from the back. He's probably looking for a handout or trying to steal something. Just look at him. He doesn't belong here." The accusation was so loud and so clear that several other passengers turned to look. The cabin, once humming with quiet anticipation, fell silent. Elijah finally sighed, the sound inaudible over his music. He could feel the woman's stare like a physical weight. He slowly pulled his headphones down, letting them rest around his neck. He turned his head and looked at Caroline, his expression perfectly, frustratingly neutral. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" he asked, his voice deep and calm. Caroline recoiled, as if his speaking to her was a further offense. "The problem," she said, enunciating every syllable, "is that you are in the wrong cabin. I believe economy class is in the rear of the aircraft. I'm sure they'll be happy to have you." Elijah held her gaze. He didn't blink. "I'm in seat 1A. This is 1A. I believe you're in 1C." "How dare you!" she gasped. She turned back to Beth, her face reddening. "I am a first-class passenger. I paid over $10,000 for my ticket. I will not be forced to sit near this individual. He's clearly lying. He probably has a fake ticket. I demand you check it, and then I demand you move him." This was the critical moment for Beth. She was new, only 6 months on the job, and this route was her first time working the premium cabin. She looked at Mrs. Stratford, who looked expensive, demanding, and exactly like the high-value customers they were trained to coddle. Then she looked at the man in the hoodie, who looked unimpressive. Beth made the wrong choice. "Sir," she said, turning to Elijah, her voice taking on a falsely sweet, condescending tone. "I'm sure this is just a simple mix-up. Would you mind showing me your boarding pass, please?" Elijah stared at Beth for a long, silent moment. The disappointment in his eyes was far worse than any anger. He saw her assess him, saw her calculate, and saw her fail. "You're not asking her for her boarding pass," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Sir, please don't be difficult," Beth said, her plastic smile strained. "I just need to verify your seat." "No," Caroline snapped. "Don't verify it. Just remove him. I don't feel safe. He looks threatening. I want him moved to economy, where he belongs." "Threatening?" Elijah repeated, raising an eyebrow. He slowly reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out his phone. He opened the Airline app and held the screen up to Beth. The bright QR code was clearly visible, with Cole Elijah, seat 1A, first, displayed above it. Beth glanced at it, her face paling. He was ticketed. "See?" Caroline sneered, not even looking at the phone. "He's probably using a stolen credit card. It's fraudulent. I insist you call security and have him removed from this flight. Now." "Ma'am, I can't do that," Beth stammered, now realizing she was trapped. "Then you are incompetent," Caroline shouted. The entire cabin was now staring openly. "I will not sit here. Move him. Move him to a middle seat in the back. That's all he deserves. I refuse to sit down until this is handled." The standoff was complete. Caroline stood in the aisle, arms crossed. Beth was frozen on the verge of tears. And Elijah just sat there, watching, his face an unreadable mask. He had seen this play before. From the galley at the front, a new figure emerged. This was David, the cabin purser. He was older, with a military-straight posture and a face that showed he had handled everything from medical emergencies to celebrity meltdowns. He took in the scene in a single glance. Caroline's entitled rage, Beth's panicked indecision, and Elijah's unnerving calm. "Mrs. Stratford," David said, his voice quiet but radiating an authority Beth's lacked. "My name is David. I am the purser for this flight. Is there an issue with your seat?" "Yes, there's an issue." Caroline pointed at Elijah. "This man, he needs to go." David didn't even look at Elijah. He kept his eyes locked on Caroline. "Ma'am, that passenger is correctly ticketed for seat 1A. We are fully booked in all cabins. There is nowhere to move him. I need you to please take your seat as we are preparing for departure." "I will not," she shrieked. "Do you have any idea who I am? Do you know who my husband is?" The "do you know who I am" card was the last refuge of the truly desperate, and Caroline Stratford played it as if it were a royal flush. "My husband," she announced to the cabin, "is Jeffrey Stratford, of Stratford Global Logistics. We have the largest corporate account this airline holds. We spend millions with AeroWing every year. When I make a complaint, it is heard. Now I am telling you, as your single most important customer, to remove this man." David's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. "Mrs. Stratford, this is not a matter of corporate accounts. This is a matter of federal aviation policy. Every passenger has been through security and has a valid ticket for their assigned seat." "This passenger," he said, finally nodding politely toward Elijah, "is in his correct seat. You are currently in the aisle, blocking service, and preventing the cabin door from being secured. I am asking you politely, one more time. Please take your seat. You're protecting him over me? Caroline was apoplectic. Her face was a splotchy, furious red. I'll have your job for this. I'll have her job, she yelled, pointing at Beth, who flinched. I am going to bankrupt this pathetic airline with the lawsuit I file. She whipped out her phone. That's it. I'm documenting this. I'm documenting this complete and utter failure of service. She aimed her camera directly at Elijah. The flash was blindingly bright in the dim cabin light. Say hello to the world, she sneered at him. Let's all see how Aerowing treats its real customers, letting vagrants into first class. Elijah didn't flinch. He didn't hide his face. He simply looked into the camera lens, his expression still and unbothered. This lack of reaction seemed to infuriate Caroline even more than a confrontation would have. What's wrong? She goaded him. Cat got your tongue? Or are you just smart enough to know you've been caught? Elijah spoke again, his voice still perfectly level. Mum, I would advise you to stop filming me. It's a violation of my privacy, and, he added, it's generally a bad idea to create evidence of your own harassment. Harassment? I'm the one being harassed, by his very presence. David stepped between her and Elijah, blocking her phone's view. Mom, you are now creating a disturbance. Captain Mitchell has been notified. If you do not take your seat immediately, you will be deplaned. Deplaned? You're deplaning me? Yes, Mum. The finality in his voice finally cut through her rage. She looked around. The other passengers were staring at her with open contempt. A man in 2C, dressed in a sharp business suit, was also filming her. Caroline's eyes narrowed. She knew, in that moment, she had lost this initial skirmish. But the war, in her mind, was far from over. With a dramatic huff, she shoved her phone into her bag and stormed to her seat. 1C, she slammed her bag into the overhead bin, then dropped into her pod, pointedly turning her back to Elijah. This is not over, she hissed to Beth, who had come to offer her a pre-departure beverage. Not by a long shot. I want your name, and his. She pointed at David. My name is David, ma'am, and this is Beth. We will be your service team today, David said smoothly, already moving on. Get me a double vodka, neat, and I want it before we take off, she snapped. FAA regulations forbid serving hard liquor on the ground, ma'am. I can get you champagne or juice, David replied, unruffled. Useless. Completely useless, Caroline muttered, loud enough for the entire front cabin to hear. She violently snapped her privacy screen shut, creating a wall between her and the aisle. The cabin doors were sealed. The tension was so thick it felt like the air pressure had already dropped. Beth, trembling, retreated to the galley. David followed her. Breathe, Beth, he said quietly. You did okay. I almost believed her, Beth whispered, her hands shaking. I looked at him and you profiled him, David said, not unkindly. You saw her suit and his hoodie, and you made a judgment call. It was the wrong one. She is the problem, not him. But now, we have a 9-hour flight with her. Be professional, be polite, but do not placate her. Serve her exactly as required, and nothing more, and document everything, every time she's rude, every demand, every sigh. Log it. Am I clear? Yes, David, yes, thank you. As the plane began its long taxi to the runway, Elijah Cole finally closed his tablet. The work was no longer important. He leaned his head back, closed his eyes, and just listened. He listened to the engines whine, to the clink of glass in the galley, and to the furious, muttering sounds of Caroline Stratford in the pod next to him. He wasn't angry. He was calculating. He had just poured $500 million into this airline 3 months ago, a silent majority stake investment that had saved Aerowing from bankruptcy. He was flying to London for the first quarterly board meeting, where he would be introduced as the new anonymous power broker. He flew this route, in this class, under his own name, specifically to test the product. He'd just received his first, and most important, data point, and it was a failure. The ascent was smooth. As the plane broke through the clouds and the "Fasten Seatbelt" sign pinged off, the cabin crew sprang into action. The forced proximity of the cabin seemed to amplify Caroline's simmering rage. She was a predator trapped in a cage, and she needed a victim. Her first target was, again, Beth. When Beth came by to take meal orders, Caroline made a great show of her disdain. "I suppose I'll try the lobster," she said, "though I'm sure you'll find a way to ruin it. And my vodka. Now, right away, Mrs. Stratford." David, overseeing the service, watched carefully. He made sure he, not Beth, was the one to serve Caroline her drink. "Your vodka, ma'am." Caroline took it without a thank you and downed half of it in one gulp. She immediately pressed the call button. Beth, who was closest, had to respond. "Yes, Mrs. Stratford?" "More ice. This is tepid." Beth fetched more ice. A minute later, the call button chimed again. "This blanket is this polyester? It's scratchy. Get me one from the crew bunks. I know you keep the good ones for yourselves." "Ma'am, these are our standard first-class blankets," Beth explained. "Unacceptable, but I'm not surprised." This continued for an hour. The call button became a weapon. Chime. "My screen is flickering." Chime. "This water has a film on it." Chime. "I can hear the passenger behind me breathing. Do something about it." With each call, she would look past Beth or David toward seat 1A. Elijah had his headphones on, seemingly engrossed in a movie, but he was aware of every interaction. He was a master of observation, and his peripheral vision caught every eye roll, every sneer, every time Carolyn tried to make the crew complicit in her disgust. Then came the accident. David was serving Elijah his meal, a simple chicken breast and salad. As David placed the tray on the pull-out table, Caroline suddenly unbuckled and stood up, feigning a lurch with the minor turbulence. "Oh my!" she yelped, stumbling into David. Her arm, holding her fresh glass of champagne, flew out. The entire contents of the glass splashed directly onto Elijah. It soaked the front of his hoodie, his jeans, and the tablet he had just opened on his lap. "Oh goodness!" Caroline cried, her voice dripping with fake concern. "How clumsy of me. I'm just so on edge, you know. All this tension." Elijah went still. The cold liquid seeped through his clothes. He slowly, methodically, picked up his tablet and began wiping it with a napkin. David was mortified. "Mr. Cole, I am so sorry. Ma'am, please sit down." "I'm trying to help," Caroline said, grabbing a handful of napkins and making a show of dabbing at Elijah's chest. "You poor thing. This is probably your only nice outfit. And your little computer. Did I break it?" Elijah gently but firmly caught her wrist, stopping her hand from dabbing at him. His grip was light, but the message was absolute. "Do not touch me." "I'm fine," he said, his voice flat and cold. "David, I need a new set of napkins and a dry blanket. That will be all." He never once raised his voice. He never swore. He never looked at Caroline. He simply released her wrist and went back to cleaning his device. This, more than anything, seemed to break her composure. She wanted a fight. She wanted him to yell, to curse, to get aggressive, to prove her right. She wanted him to be the threatening man she'd accused him of being. His calm, his dignity, his complete and utter refusal to engage on her level. was a rejection of her entire worldview. It was, to her, the ultimate insult. "Well, fine," she snapped, her mask of concern vanishing. "If you're going to be rude about it—" She flounced back to her seat and slammed the privacy screen shut. David returned with a stack of hot towels and a fresh blanket. "Mr. Cole, I cannot apologize enough. It wasn't your fault, David," Elijah said, wiping his hands. "But I need you to do something for me. I need you to reassign Beth for the rest of this flight. She's not to serve this cabin." "It's not a punishment," he said, seeing David's expression. "It's for her own good. Mrs. Stratford is baiting her. She wants a reaction. Don't give her one." David was stunned by the man's perception. "Yes, sir. Right away. I'll handle all front cabin service personally. Again, on behalf of Aero Wing." Elijah held up a hand. "Just get me another water, David. Please." For the next few hours, an uneasy quiet settled. The lights were dimmed. Most passengers slept. But Elijah didn't sleep. He sat in his slightly damp clothes, his hoodie exchanged for the dry blanket, and he opened his laptop. He connected to the plane's spotty, expensive Wi-Fi. He had work to do. Caroline, meanwhile, had posted her video. She'd had 2 more vodkas and was now typing furiously on her phone, sending a long, detailed complaint to her husband. "Jeffrey, you won't believe the service on this flight. They let a man who looked homeless into 1A, and he's been glaring at me for hours. The crew is protecting him over me. You must pull the Stratford Global account. We'll move everything to Delta. This is the last straw. I've never been so humiliated." She hit send, took a sleeping pill, and passed out, a smug smile on her face. She dreamt of all the people who would be fired because of her. Elijah Cole's fingers moved swiftly over his keyboard. He wasn't browsing. He was writing. He drafted a single, concise email. To Robert Huxley, ruxleyaerowing.com. CC, Aerowing Executive Board, internal list. Subject, urgent, in-flight experience audit. AW12, JFK LHR, 29/10/25. Robert, I am currently on AW12, seat 1A. We have a significant, systemic failure in our premium customer experience, starting with gate-level profiling and escalating to in-flight crew panic. I was accosted by a passenger in 1C, Mrs. Caroline Stratford, who demanded I be removed to economy based on my appearance. She was verbally abusive, racist, and physically disruptive. She filmed me and has been harassing the junior crew. While the purser, David, eventually handled the situation, the initial response from F.A. Beth was to treat me as the problem. She defaulted to placating the belligerent and wealthy-looking passenger, requesting my credentials while ignoring the abuser. To be clear, this is not a training gap. This is a corporate culture failure. I was then physically assaulted when the same passenger accidentally doused me and my equipment with a full glass of champagne. I am no longer just an investor, Robert. As of this email, I am activating the active oversight clause in my contract. I am now your new head of customer experience, effective immediately. I expect you, a ground operations manager, and airport security to meet me at the gate upon arrival at LHR. We are making changes before I even leave the airport. See you in London. E. Cole, majority shareholder, EC Global Investments. He hit send. The email vanished into the ether, rocketing from 35,000 feet to the servers on the ground. At Aerowing's corporate headquarters in London, it was just after 4 a.m. But Robert Huxley, the CEO, was awake. He was a notorious insomniac, a habit that served him well. His phone, which was linked only to his most critical servers, buzzed on his nightstand. He read the email. His blood ran cold. He had known E. Cole was a ruthless investor. He was the silent shadow who had saved the company, but his terms were ironclad. The active oversight clause was one Huxley had prayed would never be used. It essentially gave Cole the power to take over any department at any time without a board vote. And he had just been activated by a racist passenger and a poorly trained flight attendant. Huxley was out of bed in seconds, dialing his operations manager. "Get out of bed. Now. Get to Heathrow. Get a suit on. I want security, the best security, at Gate 32 in Terminal 3. And get me everything, on a passenger named Caroline Stratford, Flight 12, Seat 1C. I want her social media, her husband's company, her dog's name. Now." Back on the plane, the message was also filtering down. David, in the galley preparing for the pre-landing breakfast service, received a message on his internal crew tablet. It came directly from the captain, which was rare. "Purser eyes only. Urgent and confidential. David, I just received a message from CEO Huxley. Passenger in 1A, Elijah Cole, is our new majority shareholder. I repeat, he is the primary investor. He is, and I quote, the new owner. He has reported a severe passenger misconduct incident and crew failure. Handle with extreme prejudice. All interactions with 1A and 1C are to be reported. CEO and security will be meeting us at the gate." David read the message once, then twice. He felt the blood drain from his face. He looked through the curtain into the dark cabin. He saw the passenger in 1C, Caroline Stratford, sleeping soundly, a faint snore escaping her lips. She looked peaceful, completely unaware that she had just detonated a nuclear bomb in the middle of her own life. Then he looked at 1A, Elijah Cole, the owner, the man in the hoodie and jeans who she had demanded be thrown off the plane, the man she had doused in champagne, the man who had, with terrifying calm, just taken over the entire company from 35,000 feet. David gripped the counter. He had been professional, but had he been protective? He had defended the man's right to the seat, but he had not protected him from the harassment or the assault. He walked quietly back into the cabin and knelt by Elijah's pod. The man's eyes opened instantly. He hadn't been asleep. "Mr. Cole," David whispered, his voice shaking slightly. I have just been made aware of who you are." Elijah just looked at him. "I want to apologize, personally, and for my entire crew. The way you were treated it was indefensible. I thought I was managing a rude passenger. I didn't realize. I should have done more. I should have issued her a final warning card. I should have—" Elijah cut him off, his voice still quiet. "David, you were the only person who did their job. You followed protocol. The protocol is the problem. You defended the seat, but you didn't defend the passenger. It's a subtle distinction, but it's the one that matters. Yes, sir. You're right. I have a board meeting at noon. I want you there," Elijah said. "Sir?" David's eyes went wide. "In London? I'm just cabin crew. You are now my primary example of what's right and what's wrong with this airline. You, Beth, and Captain Mitchell. I want you all there. We're going to write a new protocol. My car will be waiting for you all." "Yes, Mr. Cole." David stood up, a new, profound sense of shock and purpose settling over him. He was no longer just serving breakfast. He was about to help rebuild an airline. He turned and looked at Caroline Stratford's sleeping form one last time. "Mum," he whispered to himself, "you have no idea what's coming." As the first rays of morning light streamed through the windows, Flight 12 began its final descent into Heathrow. The tone in the cabin had shifted. The crew, now all aware via David, were a model of crisp, deferential efficiency. They avoided Caroline Stratford's pod as if it were radioactive. Beth, her eyes red, stayed in the galley, as ordered. Elijah had changed into a fresh set of clothes he'd packed in his carry-on, a simple, clean black t-shirt and new jeans. He looked just as unassuming as before. The plane touched down with a gentle bump. As it taxied to the gate, Caroline finally woke up. She stretched, cracked her neck, and looked around, feeling victorious. She had survived the indignity. She had her evidence. Her husband was going to ruin this airline. She was already composing the scathing review in her head. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged off. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Mitchell's voice came over the PA. "Welcome to London Heathrow. We ask that all passengers remain seated. Due to a special arrival procedure, no one is to leave their seat until the cabin door is opened, and you are instructed to do so by the cabin crew." A murmur went through the cabin. This was unusual. Caroline scoffed. "Probably looking for him," she muttered, nodding toward Elijah. "Probably found out his ticket was stolen." Elijah just gathered his tablet and his old hoodie. The jet bridge connected with a solid thump. The cabin door was opened by David. Standing in the doorway was not the usual ground crew. It was a line of 3 men in dark, impeccably tailored suits. In the lead was Robert Huxley, the CEO, his face a grim mask of anxiety. Behind him were 2 stone-faced airport security officers. Robert Huxley boarded the plane. He scanned the cabin, his eyes landing on 1A. He walked briskly down the aisle, past a completely bewildered Caroline Stratford. He stopped at Elijah's seat and extended his hand. "Mr. Cole," Huxley said, his voice loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "Welcome to London. I am Robert Huxley, the CEO of Aero Wing. I cannot begin to express my apologies for what you endured on this flight. I received your email. I am mortified." Elijah shook his hand, his grip firm. "Robert, you got here fast. Your car is waiting. My entire executive team is on standby for the board meeting you called. We are ready to begin, sir." The blood drained from Caroline Stratford's face. It happened in a single, horrifying second. The color vanished, leaving her skin a pasty, sickly white. "Mr. Cole, sir, board meeting?" She stared at the man in the faded hoodie, who was now being treated like royalty by the CEO. I don't understand," Caroline stammered, her voice a small, lost sound. What is going on?" Huxley, having concluded his greeting with Elijah, slowly turned his body to face her. His eyes, which had been anxious and deferential when looking at Elijah, were now chips of ice. "Mrs. Caroline Stratford," he said, his voice booming with cold, corporate fury. She started. "I am the CEO of this airline. The man you have spent the last 9 hours harassing, filming and assaulting is Mr. Elijah Cole. Mr. Cole is our new majority shareholder. He owns this company." The silence in the cabin was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Caroline's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "We have reviewed your social media posts, Mrs. Stratford," Huxley continued, his voice relentless. "We have the reports from the crew. We have statements from other passengers. And we have the footage you, yourself, so helpfully posted, which shows you committing multiple violations of airline policy and, frankly, of basic human decency." But I thought," she sputtered, pointing a shaking finger at Elijah. Elijah finally looked at her. He didn't look angry. He just looked tired. "You thought because I was wearing a hoodie, I didn't belong," he said simply. "You thought because I was a black man in first class, I must have been a fraud. You saw what you wanted to see." "No, that's not—" "My husband!" she finally shrieked, finding her last line of defense. "Jeffrey Stratford, Stratford Global. You can't talk to me like this. We'll pull our account." This was the moment. the calmer. The twist of the knife she had sharpened herself. Robert Huxley, the CEO of Aero Wing, almost smiled. It was a terrifying, humorless twitch of his lips, the expression of a man who was about to bring down a hammer he had been waiting his whole career to wield. He had just finished his obsequious greeting with Mr. Cole, and now he pivoted. The shift in his demeanor was palpable. The air in the first-class cabin, already thick with tension, seemed to drop 10 degrees. His anxiety-ridden deference to Elijah vanished, replaced by a gaze so cold it could have etched glass. He locked his eyes on Caroline Stratford. "Mrs. Caroline Stratford," he said. His voice wasn't a yell. It was a blade. It was the sound of a judge pronouncing a sentence. Caroline, who had been watching this impossible scene, the CEO of the airline bowing to the vagrant, felt a spike of pure, unadulterated panic. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. I, she stammered, her voice a reedy, unfamiliar sound. "I am the CEO of this airline," Huxley continued, stepping into the aisle, his presence dominating the small space. He spoke with a slow, deliberate cadence, ensuring every single passenger, every single crew member heard every single word. "The man you have spent the last 9 hours harassing, filming, threatening, and ultimately assaulting." He paused, letting the word assaulting hang in the dead silent cabin. "Is Mr. Elijah Cole?" "Mr. Cole," Huxley announced, turning his head slightly to indicate the man in 1A, "is our new majority shareholder. He does not just fly with this company, Mrs. Stratford. He owns this company." The silence that followed was not just an absence of sound. It was a vacuum. It was the collective gasp of every passenger, the frozen-in-time horror of Caroline Stratford, as her brain desperately tried to reconcile the man in the hoodie with the word owner. Owner. Her face, which had been red with indignation just hours before, blanched to a sickly, mottled white. Her manicured hand, the one that had thrown the champagne, flew to her mouth. "No," she whispered. It was an involuntary sound of denial. That's not possible. Look at him." "Yes," Huxley said, his eyes narrowing. "We all looked at him. And you, Mrs. Stratford, were the only one who decided to act on your assumptions. We have reviewed your social media posts. We have the official reports from the purser. We have signed witness statements from your fellow passengers. And we have the footage you, yourself, so helpfully posted, which shows you committing multiple violations of airline policy and, frankly, of basic human decency." But he," she sputtered, her mind scrambling, searching for a foothold in a world that had just turned upside down. She was sinking, and she grabbed for the only lifeline she had ever known. Her voice rose, cracking into a desperate, familiar shriek. "My husband! You can't talk to me like this. You have no idea who he is. Jeffrey Stratford, Stratford Global Logistics. We are your biggest corporate account. We will pull everything. We will ruin you." It was her trump card, the one she had been waiting to play. She looked at Huxley, expecting to see the flicker of fear she always saw in service staff. She saw nothing. Huxley didn't even deign to respond. He simply looked past her, to seat 1A. It was Elijah Cole who spoke. His voice, calm and measured, cut through her shrill threats like a scalpel. He slowly, deliberately, picked up the battered tablet from his lap, the one still faintly sticky from her champagne. He held it up. "Your husband's account," Elijah said, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable weight. "Stratford Global?" "Yes. I know them well. Your husband, Jeffrey, has been in aggressive negotiations with our board for the last 3 months." Caroline's eyes locked on the tablet. She didn't understand. He was proposing, Elijah continued, his gaze flat and unblinking, a new exclusive $300 million logistics partnership with this airline, a deal that, from my reading of his financials, would have saved his company from a catastrophic quarter, a deal I was flying here to London to personally sign. He tapped the screen of the tablet. This proposal. This was what I was reviewing when you boarded the plane, Mrs. Stratford. I was the final vote. Caroline's entire body went rigid. The connection was made. The "oh God" that escaped her lips was not a curse. It was a prayer. The deal, Elijah said, his voice dropping even lower, colder, was contingent on a new shared values clause, a partnership based on mutual respect, professionalism, and modern standards of conduct. He held her gaze for one long, agonizing second. And for the last 9 hours, you have given me a very clear, very public demonstration of the Stratford values. You are entitled, you are cruel, you are a bigot. And in the most practical, financial sense, Mrs. Stratford, you are a liability. He turned his head, just slightly, toward the CEO. Robert. Yes, Mr. Cole? The Stratford Global deal is dead. Kill it. Send their legal team a copy of this flight's incident report, a link to Mrs. Stratford's social media page, and a bill for the cleaning of my equipment. That should be all the explanation they need. Immediately, Mr. Cole, Huxley replied, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. No. The shriek that tore from Caroline's throat was primal. It was the sound of a life ending. No, you can't. Please. Jeffrey, he needs that deal. It's everything. It will ruin him. It will ruin me. Please. She fumbled with her seatbelt, her hands shaking so badly she could barely find the buckle. She looked at Elijah, her face a grotesque mask of tears and running makeup. I didn't know. I didn't know who you were. If I had known. That's the entire point, Elijah said, finally standing up and pulling his simple backpack from the overhead bin. He zipped it closed. You shouldn't need to know who a person is to treat them with basic decency. He looked at Huxley. She's your problem now. Huxley nodded and turned back to the weeping, hyperventilating woman in 1C. Mrs. Stratford, he said, his voice returning to its formal, icy tone. Due to your continuous disruptive and abusive behavior on this international flight, Aerowing Airlines is banning you for life. Your name is now on our global no-fly list, effective immediately. You will never set foot on one of our aircraft again. Banned? She gasped, the word barely audible. Banned! These officers, Huxley said, gesturing to the 2 airport security men who had been standing silently by the door, will escort you to a private room. You will be interviewed by the Metropolitan Police regarding the in-flight assault on Mr. Cole. Your viral video, I'm sure, will be very helpful to their investigation. Please gather your belongings. But Caroline couldn't move. She was frozen, her world in smoking ruins around her. Elijah Cole walked past her, his old sneakers not making a sound on the plush carpet. He didn't look at her. He paused at the front of the cabin, where David, Beth, and Captain Mitchell were standing, their faces a mixture of shock and awe. Robert, Elijah said, my car is downstairs. I assume David, Beth, and the captain have been cleared to join us for the board meeting. They have, sir, Huxley confirmed. Good, Elijah said. Let's go. We're late. Huxley, Elijah, and the crew walked off the plane, a unified front moving toward the future. The other first-class passengers finally unbuckled, eager to flee the toxic scene. As they filed out, they had to walk past Caroline, who was now sobbing hysterically as the 2 security officers stood over her. The man from 2C, the one who had filmed her, paused as he passed. He looked down at her, shook his head, and said, "Have a nice day." The fallout was not a quiet ripple. It was a tidal wave. 1 week later, the story was an inferno across the global news cycle. The video, captured by the passenger in 2C and aptly titled "First Class Karen Gets Banned by the Airline's Owner," had been viewed over 50 million times. Caroline Stratford's name and face were plastered everywhere, the archetype of arrogant entitlement. News outlets dug into her background, her husband's company, and her history of scathing online reviews, painting a portrait of a woman who had weaponized her privilege one time too many. For Jeffrey Stratford, the blowback was catastrophic. His company, Stratford Global Logistics, was built on a reputation of ironclad reliability and smooth, discreet partnerships. But there was nothing discreet about this. The investment world hates messy public scandals. The moment Aero Wing officially confirmed the $300 million partnership was terminated indefinitely, pending an internal review of partner values, Stratford Global's stock didn't just fall, it nosedived. It shed 40% of its value in a single trading day, a paper loss of hundreds of millions. His board was apoplectic. His partners were spooked. Jeffrey released a terse public statement proclaiming he was appalled and disgusted by his wife's abhorrent behavior. But it was a flimsy shield against a hurricane. He was in full damage control mode, but the damage was already done. The call had come from his wife, but the financial ruin was all his. 1 month later, the initial inferno had burned down to smoldering ruins, the ruins of Caroline Stratford's life. The ban from Aero Wing was just the beginning. She was now radioactive. The exclusive clubs she frequented quietly misplaced her membership. Invitations to the charity galas where she once ruled as a queen, simply stopped coming. She tried to have lunch at Le Bernardin, a restaurant where she'd had a standing weekly reservation for 5 years. The maitre d', a man who used to greet her with fawning praise, met her at the door with a look of profound pity. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Stratford," he'd said, his voice barely a whisper. We have no tables available for the foreseeable future." The whispers, the pointed fingers, the people who suddenly found the floor fascinating when she walked by. It was a social death. The final execution, however, was a personal one. It came not as a shout, but as a quiet thud from the mail slot. A high-paid courier, avoiding all eye contact, had delivered a thick, cream-colored envelope. Inside, the legal lettering was cold and precise. Jeffrey Stratford had filed for divorce. She read the words that had been leaked to the press, her hands trembling so violently she could barely hold the paper. He cited irreparable and catastrophic damage to his professional reputation and financial standing, directly and legally blaming her public and hateful conduct. He wasn't just divorcing her, he was disowning her. The ironclad prenuptial agreement she had once bragged about was now a cage. She had lost her husband, her reputation, her social standing, and, she would soon find out, almost all of her fortune. She was alone in a vast, silent mansion, banned from the skies and exiled from the very world she had tried so desperately to protect. 3 months later, Aero Wing Airlines, in stark contrast, was being reborn. Elijah Cole had moved with the same deliberate, unhurried pace he'd shown on the plane. He wasn't interested in firing everyone. He was interested in fixing the rot. The ground-up respect initiative was rolled out, and its impact was immediate. At its head was the newly promoted director of in-flight experience, David. He was no longer just a purser. He was an architect of change. He stood before the first new training class, his old uniform replaced with a sharp suit, but his eyes held the same steady authority. For years, David told the room of new recruits, we were trained to manage high-value customers. That meant we were trained to placate the loudest person in the room. We were trained to value the suit over the hoodie. The problem is, we were valuing the wrong things. Our new, single most important rule is this: protect the passenger, not the purse. He clicked to a new slide. It was a picture of a charcoal grey hoodie. This is your passenger, this is your CEO, and this, he said, clicking again, is a $10,000 ticket. Treat the person wearing the hoodie with the same respect as the person holding the ticket, because you never, ever know who they are. And more importantly, it shouldn't matter. And standing beside him, co-leading the presentation, was Beth. Her redemption had been central to Elijah's plan. He had seen her panic, but also her capacity for remorse. She wasn't a cruel person. She was an untrained one who had defaulted to a broken protocol. She spoke to the new hires with a raw, powerful honesty that no corporate manual could ever capture. I made the wrong call, she said, her voice clear and strong. I looked at a man, and in less than 10 seconds, I sided against him, based on nothing but his clothes. I profiled him. I failed him. I failed my crew, and I failed this company. I carry that shame with me. But now, this new training, it's not just words. It's a shield. It's a protocol that empowers you to do the right thing, to de-escalate, and to protect everyone on board, not just the one who screams the loudest. Don't be the person I was. Be the person this company is training you to be. 6 months later, the ultimate test. Elijah Cole was on another flight, Aerowing 44, non-stop from London to Tokyo. He was, as was his custom, in seat 1A. He was wearing his favorite charcoal grey hoodie, his old jeans, and his headphones were resting around his neck. He was reviewing quarterly fuel expenditure reports on his tablet. A young flight attendant, her name tag reading Sophie, approached his pod. She didn't startle. She didn't hesitate. She didn't offer a fake, strained smile or a fawning, nervous one. Her smile was calm, professional, and genuine. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Cole," she said, warmly, her voice at a perfect, respectful pitch. "It's a genuine honor to have you flying with us today. I just finished my final certification with Director David and lead trainer Beth. They are absolutely incredible." Elijah looked up from his tablet, a rare, small smile touching his own lips. "They are our best. They're the new standard." "Absolutely, sir," she said. "The new standard is why we're all here. Can I get you your usual bottle of still water before we take off?" "That would be perfect, Sophie." "Thank you," he said. She brought the water, placed it quietly on his console, and moved on to the next passenger with the exact same level of professional warmth. She didn't cast a single backward glance. He wasn't an anomaly. He wasn't a problem. He wasn't a threat or a stowaway. He was simply a passenger in seat A. Elijah Cole put his headphones on, took a sip of his water, and leaned his head back against the cream-colored leather. He looked out the window as the massive engines began to whine. The system was working. The culture was changing. The lesson had been taught, and the karma had been delivered, not just as a punishment for Caroline, but as a reward for the entire airline. The plane, his plane, began its powerful roll down the runway, and for the first time in a long time, he closed his eyes and simply relaxed. That's the story of how a single act of prejudice on a 9-hour flight cost a woman her marriage, her fortune, and her reputation. It's a powerful reminder that you truly never know who you're talking to. The person you look down on might be the very person holding the keys to your world. Caroline Stratford thought her money gave her power, But Elijah Cole showed her that true power lies in character, and that karma always, always cashes the check. Thank you so much for watching. We work hard to bring you these stories of justice and real-life karma every single week. If you enjoyed this, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to see it. Most importantly, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. We've got a new one coming next week, and you won't want to miss it.